Seattle Seawolves versus Glendale Raptors. It finished 20-18. It's the fourth game of the round that has finished within a single score. And joining me, we have Rob from his studio, but also we have Tony Ridnell from the actual stadium itself. Oops, that's not the right camera, folks. So,
hold on one sec, Paul. Sorry, man.
We'll let Tony get his.
It's 2019, but we got some technical
difficulties. That's no problem. So a cold day up in Seattle, which is obviously up north there, but not got the snow.
There we go.
Places like New York and Toronto, hence they can get the early games in. So, Tony, a packed crowd. It sounded like a great atmosphere.
Just amazing. Yeah, it was a great evening. 2 hours before the game, probably half the crowd was here. An hour before the game, they did the ring ceremony. Probably 80% of the crowd. It was just another great Seattle night. Sunday night, angry, nasty crowd, great atmosphere. And pretty darn good game, I think. It's hard sometimes to tell when you're in the stands just screaming, but it looked like a pretty darn good game.
Yeah, it was. And I can see you're all wrapped up. So it was cold, which must have made for cold hands and difficult handling.
Yeah, it's not warm. It's not warm. Yeah, it's very interesting. Looking at the pitch, it's probably 1 or 2. It's probably 1 or 2 degrees, as you would say, down in New Zealand. But the conditions were great, really, really great. I just thought, as a matter of the course of play on the field, the Seattle struggled in the lineout, which did not allow them to create any dominance at all. Other than that, it was a very even match, fantastic commitment by both teams.
Yeah, for me, Glendale struggled to break down the defence apart from that quick period after half time. When they were a bit more direct, but they were going too wide too early and playing and causing themselves their own problems by trying to break down that Seattle defence that's happened with that. Seattle, on the other hand, didn't seem to be able to put more than about 4 or 5 phases together before they either kicked it or they turned it over.
Sure.
So very much a counter-attacking game from Seattle. So when they had the kicking duels and they got Turner to run with the ball, they looked dangerous. But a lot of their attacks had to come from quite a long way out.
Okay. Yes, I'm just in the broadcaster's booth with Pete Steinberg and Dan Powers, so I might get booted out of here in a minute.
Yeah, broadcasting to a different, not CBS. So thank you, CBS, for the coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Paul, I'm gonna get jumping here, but it's great to talk to you guys.
Cheers. Thanks,
Rob, nice to chat. Yeah, no worries. Great event. We're gonna have a great season this season. I think the whole league's gonna be absolutely fantastic. Really great. Talk to you guys soon.
Talk to you soon, Tony.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
So, Rob, how did you see the game? Because that was our quick reporter from the ground.
Oh, now we got rid of that pesky guy that actually played the game. We can get down to it. I think you got it there at the end. I think it was a contest between Glendale controlling the ball and Seattle counterattacking, and there was just enough counterattacks for Seattle to get over the finish line. I sort of tactically, I thought the way Glendale was attacking on offense was maybe a little misguided. I mean, Seattle seemed to be spread really wide in their defensive setup, and still, Glendale would go, medium wide to completely wide to try to get through or around the seawall, and it just wasn't working. I was begging for them to let Honko run it up inside a few times, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I didn't see him. We also obviously had one big break, and he was very nice and niggly. Plenty of getting involved in afters around a lot. But yeah, he didn't seem to do much carrying up the guts, as you say. And when we watched San Diego versus Rooney earlier today, it was when San Diego started to do a bit of pick and goes in that early second half that they sort of sucked in and caused problems for Rooney's defence. I was a bit surprised Glendale didn't try that at any point during this game. We never really saw pick and goes unless it was 5 metres out from the try line.
Yeah, me too. And I think Glendale has a really solid back three that played fairly well for the most part. But I wish they would have used them a little differently. I wish they would have sucked in the defense a bit and then gotten the ball outside and let Davidson and let DTS and Ryberg run around with the ball a bit.
Yeah, that Ryberg is a big fella. There's no two ways about it. And he got plenty of comments on the Facebook feed saying that, hey, perhaps he's big enough, perhaps he should be playing 6 or 7 rather than actually out on the wing. But yeah, he was very dangerous, or looks like a guy who can be very dangerous if you get him one-on-one running over players. But if we go back to the beginning of that game, to me the big difference here between this game and a lot of the others was how clinical the first exit was from Glendale. These two teams do look to be a step above the others in that kind of in their coaching and having their structures in place.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we saw 4 really close games in the competition this week, and I suspect that all comes to an end next week when these guys aren't playing each other. I think both these teams are a cut above the other 7 teams, and I think the scoreboard's going to show it in a week's time.
Yep, and it'd been a tight battle and up front, but Seattle were definitely happy to take a long pot early doors with the kick at goal, but just came up short. And you'd think at home they would know what their range was, but clearly he wasn't. He misjudged that one early. And then we had sort of Seattle would sort of get into to the other half, but then just lost lineouts really, as Tony was mentioning, meant that in that first 15 minutes, quarter of an hour, they just would get into the opposition half and just give the ball up for Glendale to start running it back.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was very solid in the lineout, especially early on. Glendale lost a couple in a row after they were right up against Seattle's goal line. Seattle had trouble with it. I don't know. Maybe it's just first game.
Big time earlier in the day, but Seattle's kick chase was much better today.
Yeah, it seemed like competition-wide nobody was kicking to touch. I was a day late, but I was watching the Nola Gold game earlier today, and I think I can count on one hand the number of clearances that went to touch in that game. So I don't know. Somebody somewhere on this continent has decided we're going to kick and chase, and apparently that's what everybody's doing.
Arrows doing something different to everybody else. It's Gary. It's not down to Gary Gold.
I'm still waiting for the Arrows to start playing. I don't think they got off the plane yet.
Yeah, that's we'll quickly run through the other games after this, but yes, there's definitely that. Seattle then was surviving off breaks really. Had a good break. He had a pretty decent game all round, to be honest. Set up camp in the Seattle 22, and they just good patience by set up camp in the Glendale 22, and good patience by Seattle to bash it over eventually.
Yeah, they had very short stretches on offense where they were effective. That was one of them. The Seattle kind of reminds me of my Highlanders down in your part of the world, where they seem very comfortable to play defense. They think they're gonna hit a couple of counterattacks, and that's just how they're gonna beat you. They're gonna score just enough on offense to get it done, and other than that, they're gonna be comfortable to play defense and lose the possession battle, and that's fine with them.
No, absolutely. As you say, they're more than happy to give it up. Both sides actually turned down points to go to the corner at times, not particularly successfully, but Glendale did narrow things up to 10-6 at half time, and my count on penalties was that it was pretty even. I've got 7 to Seattle and 5 to Glendale, but I probably missed a couple, to be honest. But yeah, it seemed fairly even on the old penalty count to me.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was actually, one of the things I noticed during the course of the entire weekend is I thought the officiating was pretty good. I think there's some other aspects of the competition that probably need some help. But I thought tonight's game was pretty well officiated. I thought yesterday's game, at least the one that was on the ESPN feed, was pretty well officiated. So that's good. That's a step in the right direction if you want to have a respectable comp.
Yep, they are. So that took us to half time. It was 10-6. Just going to quickly take a question from the chat there. Dougish asks, what is the rule for domestic players versus imports? Well, to start off with, Canadian players don't count as imports, and I think it's something like you're allowed 10 imports in the entire squad, something like that. So you do have to have some domestic players.
I think that's the right neighborhood, and I don't know. I was kind of fascinated as we watched the lineups be introduced in the various broadcasts by how many different foreign flags we saw. I think that's probably a good thing. Anything that raises the level of play is a good thing for MLR, especially at the start. We don't necessarily want to become the top 14 and have no domestic players, because then we won't have a national team like France doesn't. But nevertheless, you want the quality of play to be as high as you can get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that second half, we had a quick burst by Glendale, with going a bit more direct. Eventually, Tiakato Simpson, who is actually a Kiwi playing at 15 for Glendale, went over. But that had been come down by playing more direct, getting themselves a penalty, line out more. The ball came in, and they cut back across. And then Honko took the kick off. Everyone decided to just fall off tackles, and hey presto, he was down the other end of the pitch in no time at all, down the right hand side. Down the right hand side. They switched the ball all the way across the left, and Ryberg, who we've talked about already, goes over in the corner. And Glendale suddenly came alive for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a two. I'm going to turn around and ask you a question here in a second, but it's a 2-possession game. Glendale seems firmly in control, seems to have all the momentum, and in my notes I've got that at the 45-minute mark. But so in the last 35 minutes, what do you think you saw, Paul? Was Glendale that misguided offensively that they didn't score again, or was Seattle just that brilliant on defense, especially in their own half?
I think it comes down to a combination of things. One, they didn't stop. They didn't fall off tackles again, because they kicked to Honko straight after that try again, but he was definitely better marked that time, so they didn't allow that kind of break. So they didn't fall off tackles again. They sort of seemed to come out a bit slow from half time, and took a while to wake up, and I think that was part of it. Is they stopped falling off tackles, and secondly, I think Glendale went away from what was working, which was playing a bit more direct. To me, they switched back to what they were doing in the first half for some reason. Perhaps got involved in a couple of kicking drills they shouldn't have done as well, to try and thinking, hey, we're 2 scores up now, let's just make them play from their own half. And when you're playing a counter-attacking team, that's not really very clever, because that's what they're happy to do. They're happy to break from their own half, which is what Glendale is, but they're not happy to put together a whole bunch of phases.
No, they're not. And I guess at the end of the day, they didn't need to. I'm really torn on as to whether I saw poor execution by Glendale or great execution by Seattle in the last half hour. I don't know. It baffles me a bit that Glendale couldn't find a way to turn the scoreboard any further than the 18 that they ended up with after all the time they spent in the Seattle half.
Yeah, and that's got to be the big worry for Glendale, is that something that happened during the final last year has just gone and happened all over again.
Right.
Where they've had they've had the lion's share of possession, they've had the lion's share of territory, and they've not come away with the points from that. We had one attempt to drop goal from Seattle from about halfway, which was crazily far out for a drop goal, really. And we heard the commentators talking about it for Glendale, but Glendale never actually had a go, which was a bit of a surprise. I don't think they ever gave themselves a platform, maybe.
Yeah, no, they didn't. I was kind of waiting for it in the last, it was maybe 2.5 minutes with the last time that Glendale really had possession of the ball. I was waiting for Seema to sort of find his way into position to make a go of it, and he never really did. Maybe they felt like they needed to run the clock down further, but by the time they did that, they had lost the ball.
So yeah, so a bit surprised that neither side were going for drop goals. And we're talking about execution, but oh yeah, to be fair, the try that got it sort of back to being close was a hell of a try from Stella. Glendale sort of lost the ball. Seattle sort of turned it over, and then spun wide, kick and chase, and yeah, he spotted he was up against a hooker, and a hooker against a winger. When you kick and chase, there's only one winner.
Yeah, I rewound that a couple of times and asked you another question, Paul. I rewound that a couple of times. I was looking for what happened to DTS, and let's see, that would have been the left side. So that would have been Davidson on that side. Where, as Stoller kicked it and started to chase it, I'm okay, DTS, the fullback's going to show up. The left wing is going to at least be chasing him from behind, and neither one of them were ever made it into the picture. So it didn't seem like the ball was turned over so quickly that those guys should have been so far out of position. And, it's just really unfortunate, again, if you're playing a counterattacking team who's not going to possess the ball, who's not going to march up and down the field on you, their only chance to win is for you to make sort of a colossal error like that. So, I don't know. I guess my question to you, Paul, is what the heck happened to those guys? Where'd they go?
I'm guessing they were up in the line on the right-hand side of the pitch. Expecting to get the ball, expecting to having some sort of attack lined up. It got turned over, and they didn't get back into position quickly enough, basically.
Yeah, you're probably right. It just, I don't know. Again, rewinding it, watching it again, it just didn't feel like the ball was turned over so suddenly that those guys should have been that far out of position. But clearly I'm wrong, and clearly they were.
Well, there should be, and there is actually are two different things.
True.
So maybe they should have got back. But weren't putting in the effort that they should have done. And then the other thing that Seattle were known for last year is obviously their scrum, and in the end, a scrum penalty was enough to win the game. But I just remember now that Seattle twice got near the try line around either side of that drop goal we were talking about. But twice they knocked on with the try line. Well, once over the try line, and then once with the try line begging. They very nearly let this game slip by with those handling errors. They didn't, as you say, they didn't execute on attack like they needed to. Or should they?
No, and you got to figure, who knows how the comp ultimately plays out in its entirety. But you got to figure if you're playing that same game in Glendale and you make those kinds of errors, you're not gonna come out of there with a victory. So that obviously that's something that they'll want to clean up. And my guess is they'll tell you that it was game one and they won't make excuses, but it was game one and the weather wasn't exactly optimal for ball handling, and that probably has a fair bit to do with it.
Yep. So I think in the end, I think the right team kind of won, because I think Seattle left more points out there than Glendale did. But Glendale, as the commentators said, played straight into Seattle's game plan, and we're going to need to see them have to change that up when it comes to next year, when it comes to return game. And when we're talking about here with Glendale, we are talking about the team that's been around the longest. The team that's been coached the most is the most coached team out there. There's got to be some question marks around the coaches really here, that they only have plan A and aren't being able to adapt to this and for what is supposed to be the best coached team. When you think that Seattle have only just got themselves a coach, and last year they had a player coach, you've got to say that there should be some question marks around the guys at Glendale, I think.
Well, and I think you find that out for real the next time these two teams meet. If having lost the final and then turning around and having lost this game, not so much because of the score, because it was close, but basically, the way that they lost, I think you're right. If they go play in Glendale, whenever that is, and you see a very similar game where Glendale's basically just banging their head against the wall for 80 minutes, then I think your question about coaching is entirely fair. So, coaches have got to be flexible. They've got to be malleable. They've got to know their teams well enough to be able to make adjustments. And you're right. We're going to find out now. Glendale having lost to Seattle twice in a row, we're going to find out now if Glendale can make some adjustments, and if they can't, questions about the coaching are entirely fair.
So congratulations, Seattle. You managed to win the game with the lowest score, or the lowest winning score of the weekend, of 20 points. The other games we had, so we had New Orleans goal against Toronto Arrows, and that finished 36-31. You caught up with that one that one today. So
I did, and I got to say the first thing I noticed, and what I was really hoping would be improved this year with the competition is the quality of the broadcasts across the board. And you look at the NOLA game, and that broadcast, well, fortunately, it got better. I thought the San Diego broadcast was better than that one, and then the broadcast tonight was probably the best of the three. But between some sound engineering problems, the camera work, and some other smaller things in the NOLA game, it seems to me that the number one priority for MLR has got to be how this thing presents on television, because it's a very regional game at the moment. You're not in all of the big markets in the country. Folks like me are digesting this thing entirely by broadcast. They need to be as good as they possibly can be, and I didn't feel like that NOLA broadcast was, which is unfortunate. I also wanted to mention in the Seattle game, I don't know about you watching online, but I couldn't find the blue lines on half of the field, and they need to clean that up too. This thing needs to present on television as well as it possibly can. In terms of the game.
But no, you're right about the blue lines in Seattle. You especially under lights. I think during the daytime games, it was easier to see, but under lights, it's really hard to see those lines.
Yeah, and that come on, you can't have it. In terms of how the game went in New Orleans, I really was expecting a lot more from Toronto. I was really surprised that New Orleans kind of jumped out and, save for a short stretch of that game, pretty much controlled that game. Toronto made a late comeback and made it interesting, but for a team that really struggled last year, that's a pretty good opening win for NOLA. And boy, I think everyone's expectations for Toronto are much higher than what we saw yesterday.
So I got 3 out of 4 correct in my picks this weekend, and I thought that Toronto were going to struggle. And I think what we saw there was a new franchise with players who don't know each other that well. And they got burnt out wide with their, and I think that's especially in that first half. I think so defensively, I think they weren't as connected as they needed to be, and therefore they were leaving overlaps. On attack, they tried to play an awful lot of rugby, and I thought they tried to play too much, overcomplicated it on attack, especially in that first half. I didn't see the second half; I only saw the first half. But what I saw was them multiple runners all over the place, last minute passes, etc. And they were just making mistakes because they just haven't played enough together. For me.
No, I think your summation is accurate for both halves. Toronto basically beat themselves. It was one breakdown after another. Yeah, and you're right about them being new and being a new group, and maybe they haven't gelled yet, but I don't know. Call me crazy. I expected more from Toronto than what we saw.
Well, I think on the USA Rugby official site, they've got a whole bunch of pundits giving their predictions, and I think only one person got that game right. Everyone else was predicting Toronto, so don't worry about that. You weren't the only one. Then in the second game, we had Austin Elite lose to Houston Sabercats 20-21. This one was a wet game, and if we're talking about quality of coverage, I think they had some serious. I think they lost cameras at various times, etc. I think it's probably down to the weather, but again, you don't expect to suddenly only have one camera available when you've had 3 or 4 available earlier in the game.
This is the United States. We've got a long history of broadcasting sports, and we're talking about CBS and not. That was probably the local folks doing that game, but even then, we've got a lot of people with a lot of experience broadcasting sporting events in this country. It is really no excuse not to do it properly. And I actually have a brother-in-law who's in the business of doing some television engineering, and showed him one of the games late last season, and he was baffled at the quality of the broadcast. He works for a very small station where they do broadcast some sporting events, and he was mystified at why they can't seem to get it right. This is, again, the vast majority of your fans are digesting this competition in one way, and that's via broadcast. You got it. That's step number one has got to be to get that right before everything else.
So yes, that was a bit of a problem on the night. This was won by a penalty in basically extra time in the 82nd minute. So this was a close one. We had yellow cards in it as well, and I had. I thought that Houston had. I think Austin had a lot of turnover during the off season. I think Houston a bit more settled, and they managed to take that one out. And then earlier, did you catch that one, or any comments about that game?
They made that one really hard to find, which was nice of them, or at least domestically, they made it hard to find, which was nice of them.
It was actually hard to find on Facebook as well. So the other three games were all on the Major League Rugby page, but this game was on the Austin Elite Rugby page for some reason. So I think I missed the first couple of minutes, just trying to find, as you say, trying to find the feed.
Right.
A bit disappointing.
Exactly.
And then earlier today, San Diego took on Rooney, and in the end, Rooney's players or named players and quality of players told, but they're going to need to be able to deal with the pick and go a bit more, because I think everyone would have watched that game and gone, okay, the way to take on these guys is up the guts. Don't try and play wide into your Fodens and your Luke Humes and etc. and these names that we recognise. Find those names you don't recognise so much and go after them.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that that's where San Diego struggled last year, was up the middle, and they brought in some new guys, and they're better up front. But that's probably a bit of a worrying sign if you're New York, and the team that probably was the weakest up front in the competition last year all of a sudden is running straight up the gut on you.
Yep. And I thought that whilst Boyer had a good game, had scored the opening try for San Diego, for me he was probably the guy that lost them the game. I would have hooked him much earlier. A couple of passes, missing players early doors, and then his kicking in the second half was very questionable. Some box kicking very deep. Rooney collected it on the right hand side, spun it out to the left, because there wasn't a solid kick chase across the entire pitch. They would just run the ball back down the other side to at least where the kick had been taken from. And on one occasion they scored a try from it. He got lucky once because basically the pass went to ground. But some pretty questionable game management from San Diego in this one, especially for a team that made the playoffs, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, barely. I think they were the last team in, but you're right, they did. I think I'm going to be curious to see who they. Well, let's see. We got the ARC coming up, so we'll lose the Eagles anyway. But I think San Diego was down some guys today. Nate Augsburger was playing water boy, which is certainly not where you want him. They got a few other guys that are in and out of the Eagles setup that didn't play today. So I actually think if you look at it that way, maybe it's a semi-positive result for San Diego that they were able to stay within a couple of points, albeit at home, against a fairly well-regarded New York side without some guys that I think would help them quite a bit.
And yes, I picked San Diego for this game ahead of Rooney because Rooney is the expansion side, but they played with width quite nicely. and yeah, showed to be pretty connected, and they didn't look to be an expansion team in the same way. I think people are expecting a little bit too much out of Ben Foden at 13. I'm not quite sure. I thought he had a fairly decent game, but a lot of people were saying, well, he didn't do anything magical. You're like, well, okay. He made the half break for one of the tries, but
he's not a sorcerer. He's a center.
Well, he's a fullback to start off with, playing in centre.
Well,
so there is that as well. So yeah, good start for Rooney. They're going to need it. They're on the road for the first 5 games of the season, but you've got to be concerned for Toronto being on the road for the first 8 games of the season and taking that loss, as you say, against not even against a powerhouse either.
No, it wasn't. But I think those sides. The good news for them, while they're going to spend a lot of time on the road, is that they're not going to lose as many of the international guys to the ARC. So maybe they get the benefit of catching some sides that are weakened a bit by guys off playing for their country.
Yep, that's one of the things I've not taken into account. I've not gone through the squads and figured out who is losing what. But that's basically my summation of the opening weekend. Any other kind of comments about the first opening weekend?
Well, I thought it was great that the games were all close. If they're looking for parity in games coming down to the wire, that was a great thing. Again, the one thing I think they got to clean up is just the manner of the presentation. Maybe just with the local folks. I thought the CBS broadcast was very good. I thought the San Diego broadcast was very good. That needs to be the level consistently across the board.
And just to quickly run through the table then, so New Orleans Gold topped the table after week 1 with 5 points. They're the only team to have got a try bonus point. Then you go Rugby United in New York, Rooney, Seattle Seawolves and Houston Sabercats in that order, on points difference. And then Toronto in 5th with 2 points apparently, so they got the try bonus point and the losing bonus point. And then Austin Elite, San Diego Legion and Glendale Raptors, with obviously Utah Warriors yet to play. So that's your table after week 1. Will be next week for everyone. Obviously the Six Nations kicks off, as well as Major League Rugby week 2. So keep an eye out for all of that, for post-match reactions. Rob, let people know where they can get hold of you to chat rugby.
Let's see. Find me on Twitter at Rugby in America. There we go.
And obviously I'm DrivingMaul. You're on my DrivingMaul channel, so do subscribe, like, comment, all of that kind of wonderful stuff. Now, something special is going to happen on the 1st of February. Well, I think it's special anyway. There will be the opportunity to get one of these hats by joining the Bucket Hat Club via patreon.com/DrivingMaul. So look out on the 1st of February if you would like to join the Bucket Hat Club and get a DrivingMaul bucket hat. There'll be only 5 places open, so have a look out for that on the 1st of Feb. Thank you, everybody, and have a great week.